Thank you, Jay. And I don't feel alone because these books started off being friends and voices in my head and supportive. And then there's a wonderful community at which you're very much the top. And I've found that I've really decided to team up with people who get it, is the phrase I'm using. So that's a shortcut to explain, lots of thoughts, but ultimately it comes down to people caring and trying to help others flourish, be of some service, and yeah, it's a very small but wonderful community. And I'm interested in what you said about the books, because I think and hopefully we can encourage anybody listening or watching this to delve into some of the books, because none of us are Robinson Crusoe, and you've done deep research into history and philosophy, and practical matters and family systems, and you've steered me very well. In terms of how people can help, obviously people are at different stages of life. And I remember talking to you about our son, who's 16 now, and I guess he was 12 when we started talking. And what he wants is to grow and to become an adult, and a hopefully successful adult in whatever ways, whatever that means. And he is naturally observing everything, and not necessarily listening at this stage, but and not necessarily reading either, because of his generation in the technological world, but absorbing information nonetheless. And you came up with a great quote about soft shell crabs, right? I'd just like to read from another book, which is excellent, which you may have directed me to, but it's about a man who was a top chess player and then martial artist. But he says on page 33, the key to pursuing excellence is to embrace an organic long-term learning process and not to live in a shell of static, safe mediocrity. Usually growth comes at the expense of previous comfort or safety. The hermit crab is a colorful example of a creature that lives by this aspect of the growth process, albeit without our psychological baggage. As the crab gets bigger, it needs to find a more spacious shell. So the slow, lumbering creature goes on a quest for a new home. If an appropriate new shell is not found quickly, a terrible, delicate moment of truth arises. A soft creature that is used to the protection of built-in armor must now go out into the world, exposed to predators in all its mushy vulnerability. That learning phase in between shells is where our growth can spring from. Someone stuck with an entity theory of intelligence is like an anorexic hermit crab starving itself so it doesn't grow to have to find a new shell. I wonder if you could add your thoughts on that process, please.
Well, when I was 10 years old, on Long Island, which is a Long Island that extends from Manhattan out into the Long Island Sound, so for people to be oriented, I was very privileged by my parents to have summers in a very small cottage bungalow, you'd say. No heat, but we didn't need it in the summer. And my brother and I had saved money to buy a rowboat. And the reason we wanted the rowboat was because we wanted to have a crabbing business and a clamming business, a gleaning business. And even though today we would be probably fined by the various things, but 70 years ago, there were no people around bothering us. So we could take what we could catch. Well, we got to be very good crabbers. And each week, one would row and one would crab. So we shifted the duties. And when we finished the crabbing, we usually had maybe 30 crabs, hard-shelled blue-claw crabs, delicious to eat. We would put them in a bucket. We would put an oar across our shoulders with the bucket in between, and we walk up the street calling out crabs or clams or whatever we had. So this particular week, in response to your question, we had crabs. So we got to be very observant of the crab. And we got to the point where we won about 50%, and the crab won 50%. That's fair odds. Fair odds. Crabs are very good about protecting themselves. But we could see that the most valuable crabs were the soft-shell crabs. But we could also see that they were very weak and they were undefended. And as your beautiful author said, they were just meat. They were not any longer with the carapace. So I observed them, and years later, Donald, I realized that families, which is the subject of interest to me in this lifetime, and they're flourishing, they're thriving, go through the same natural cycle as the generations evolve. And I found as then in trying to describe what I saw, that the crab metaphor made all the sense in the world. So they had a size shell, let's say mom and dad and 2 kids, that was perfectly adequate for them. Safe, sound, they could function. And then one day, the daughter of that family, at the age of 23, in the old days it would have been 19, but now it's 23 or 24, came home and said to her mother, "I found the man." And your mother said, "Really?" She said, "Yes." And she said, "Well, then I must tell your father that he has to pay attention to this particular one, because he has said to me, please don't ask me to pay any attention to any of it. It just makes me upset when these men show up with my daughter. So just tell me if I have to pay attention." So the wife goes and says, "No, you got to pay attention." And lo and behold, the daughter and this young man from somewhere decide they're going to become a couple and stay together. Now, all of a sudden, 4 don't fit where they're now 5. And surprise, surprise, the younger brother starts to do the same thing. And the ladies come home and the father pays attention, or not. But in any event, now, for sure, 5 can't live where 4 did. And 6 absolutely can't. So the shell comes off. And that organism is now very weak, because it has to grow a shell that accommodates 6, but probably it's got to grow a shell that accommodates 10. So there going to be some grandchildren. So I thought to myself, this crab image just works. Now, coming back to yours and my journey together, I believed on all that we earn our keep on that helping question when we are prepared to stand with that family through that organic process. I think it's actually quite easy to offer advice, good, bad, whatever it may be, when the shell is intact and it's the right size. On the other hand, the real help comes when that family is going through its own metamorphosis, its own transformation, shedding and growing a shell. And that's when I think we earn our bread.